Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that means it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, my own little Ushabti, my own little undying statuesque guardian. It's Tom. How you doing, Tom?
Hey friends, how's it going?
Also joining us this week, and we're very happy to have him, very lucky, is the leader of the background team for the Ninth Age, Pip Hamilton. Pip, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Absolutely. We are thrilled to have you on the show and to talk about the Ninth Age background and specifically, we're going to talk some about the Undying Dynasties book, which got its sort of full release, and you can find that out there. And we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about general Ninth Age fluff and the sort of background story and all that kind of thing. We're just going to grill Pip. So he's ready. I prepared him before the show. He is ready for a grilling. He's ready to dive deep on some Ninth Age lore, and we're excited about it. Okay, but of course, as always, we start with the news. So, Tom, kick us off. What do we got in news this week?
Well, as everyone kind of expected, we have week 3 of the Fire Slayers has dropped, and we have 2 more characters: the Grim Wrath Berserker and the Battlesmith. Both the Battlesmith being the one that we had leaked sprues of last month, and I think they look good, all things considered. I think that the scale wise, it's coming in that they are all about the same as the 8th edition dwarf release. Obviously, the hair makes them stand a little bit taller. The bases seem a little bit big to me, but that said, they still look like fantastic sculpts. So what do you guys think? What Vince? Yep.
I like them. They look like good new Slayers. Could be some fun stuff. I think the characters look good. I hope everybody out there heard me during the first part. I realized my mic might have been muted, so I hope that wasn't the case. Everybody heard my introduction. They hear me now. Anyways, yeah, I think they look pretty sweet. I don't have a problem with 32 mil bases. I think that's fine. Whatever. It's good with me. Pip, what do you think about the sculpts? Are you okay with any, obviously the game underlying it, probably not a huge, not your biggest
Well, no,
passion.
I can comment on the sculpts. I mean,
There you go.
I've found, apart from the pretty much apart from the Stormcast stuff, I've found that in my opinion, most of the Age of Sigmar stuff comes across as very sort of over designed, too much detail, not enough focus on sort of the basic lines of the model, and I think that's true of these Slayers as well. Like they've got a lot of unnecessary bling, a lot of little sort of CAD details, and it feels like they're losing sight of the bigger picture. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, fair enough. So would you say, you're a fan of the sort of simpler overall aesthetic, like the smoother lines, a kind of holistic impression of the model, as opposed
Yeah,
to...
I think that with the software they've got nowadays, I think GW, they can do stuff that no other company can do, but that doesn't mean they should do it. They tend to go overboard a bit now. I think, for my money, the old metal '90s Slayers have got more character. They're at the scale you play with in a game like Warhammer, none of that tiny detail gets seen when you're playing with them. They look better as a unit.
I'll tell you, you're not alone. It's funny because if there is any truth in life, it is that all aesthetic is personal, right? But your opinion there is not. You are not a singular island. I've seen many people express the same opinion, and that's just it. When you show up, when we did our year-end contest, and we had a bunch of painted models, and some people at the beginning thought that X, Y, or Z were going to run away with it. It wasn't like that at all. Almost everything had a very equal number of votes because everybody's aesthetic, but this stuff is very personal, right?
Yeah, it's all subjective.
Yep, exactly. All right. Tom, what else we got?
So one of the big kind of news things for this week that caught me by surprise, at least, was the Chaos Battle Tome that GW has. It has come to light that they are releasing. It's a 302-page battle tome at price at $33 US. And this thing, so first, and it's a paperback, sure, but I mean this is a huge book at a fairly low price point for GW. And it looks like it's gonna be for it'll be the Grand Alliance Chaos book, and so it sounds like they're putting every war scroll for the entire mega chaos faction, which would be everything from all of the 4 god devotionals of the gods to the Skaven, to what other faction did they add in there? Oh, to Beastmen. All of those are going to be included in there, and it looks just fantastic. It looks like they're going to have lore on each of the different factions, so we're going to get basically like a 10,000-foot view of the chaos kind of army or faction as a whole. Some people had raised a stink. I think some of the Spiky Bits had written an article about suggesting that the Slaves to Darkness that was mentioned in the list for the Chaos Battle Tome was a new army. But anybody that's read through the War Scrolls, the Warriors of Chaos, that was their kind of keyword. Like High Elves, Highborn was their keyword, and so it looks like we now just have, for Slaves of Darkness at least. It's just an extension of kind of what we've seen already, which was the Chaos Warriors. But overall, I mean, I was very surprised at the price point. I'll say that. How about yourself, Vince?
Yeah, it's a good move. I mean, it's the right thing to do. I love going to soft cover. I have no problem with it if it means I get that much of a cheaper book. Seems good to me. 33 bones for all that printed out. Sure, I'll pick it up.
Yep.
Especially since I have like a bunch of those Chaos factions. Either I own them or they're in the works. I mean, I have 3 different Chaos actual God armies, and I'm working on my Beastman force. So, I mean, there you go.
Totally agree. With this, we had it looks like we're getting Khorne Reap packs this next week, which is not real surprising. The Chaos, or the I'm blanking on his name.
The Bloodthirster?
The Bloodthirster. Yeah, the Bloodthirster was out of stock last week, which obviously raised some eyebrows as to what was going on with that, and it seems like it was just 3-pack. The teaser says that Slaves to Darkness and the balance tips one more as the kind of the coming White Dwarf thing, which seems to suggest that we're going to see some more focus on chaos, either generically or we could potentially see some Tzeentch models with this as well. So yeah, looks good. In addition to that, we also have Ninth Age released its version .11.9. Pip, do you want to say anything about that?
I'm not the most competent person to speak about the rules. I know we're still in beta. I think this is a very minor correction. I think we're going through cycles of 2 books in 1 week at the moment, where the rule team and balance board go through 2 books each week, just trying to bring them to the benchmark power level, and we're only 4 books through that. So this is not a big release.
Yeah, and it looks like this is the stable one until March, at least according to the front page of the website. And so that's nice. That gives people a couple months to play around, use these rules. The only real thing I saw of note, like I went over and, obviously, as always, every time this releases, I go through and scan for the green text, the magical green text that means something had changed from the last time through. And to me, the only big one that I really saw that I thought was interesting was the change of cannons. Had went from like +1 to hit flyers to +1 to hit large targets. So, not a huge change in the great scheme of the world, right? I mean, that was like one of the biggest differences I could find. So, overall, it seemed like pretty stable, version to version there, a minor change.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Tyler Emerson this week sent us a couple elements to mention, and we're going to hit just a couple of them. There's a Tales of Sigmar event that is kicking off on February 1st. It's basically, it looks like it's a Tales of Gamers painting multi-month series for building an Age of Sigmar army with a monthly budget. If any of this looks familiar, it's basically what the PMP is currently in the process of with the Budget of Sigmar series we've mentioned on the show a couple times. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily related. It doesn't seem like they were like basing ideas or anything. Obviously, like a lot of the PMP, what we're doing, it seems to have come out of the Tales of Painters, which it seems like that's obviously also the inspiration for them as well. And so if you're interested, check it out. Tales of Sigmar. I think it's like they have a blog of
we'll put
a similar name.
Yep, I've got the link.
So check it out if you're interested. They have a little bit looser rules, and they have a little bit more you can spend each month.
$70.
So,
Oh, it's absolutely. It's crazy. Just rolling into
no,
cash your budget per month.
85.
Oh,
85. Whoa,
Crazier.
85.
It's like,
yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I don't know what kind of army you're like. What size army you're going to be spending, building after 6 months. So it's not like our restricted $50 a month. So
Yeah, absolutely cheaper. Well, when we said budget,
the budget. Seriously. The SDK was updated with all the Fireslayer hero information this last week, and Mo's making a sizable update to the Clash / Pool Comp, which should be online probably before next
tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. So very soon.
Yes.
Also on the Age of Sigmar Facebook group, Alexander Nygaard, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, set all the end time scenarios and adopted AOS battle plans to them. It's funny. This is something that Vince and I had actually been talking about recently, of doing a series of battle reports along this line, and so I think it's a great idea. I really, we'd mentioned it in a show or a review that I really think that a lot of some of those scenarios in 8th edition for End Times were actually written with Age of Sigmar in mind. And so it'll be interesting to see how those play out. Like I said, I've only glanced over them, but it looks good. And then the final like Warhammer element I had for this week was, Tyler had mentioned this, but I was actually flipping through a White Dwarf and I saw it and I mentioned it to Vince that there's a little excerpt in the Fire Slayers and it was talking about kind of like the Fire Slayers on other planes and what that looks like. Do you have the image, Vince? Pull up.
I do. There you go.
So here's a clip of it, and so in the box text they're kind of talking about what the Fire Slayers look like on other planes, basically. And it mentions Heish, which is where we believe the High Elves probably are, and it talks about how they function there, and then it talks about Ulgu, which is the dark, shadowy dimension where we believe Dark Elves are, and it says that this is the emblem or the symbol of the Fire Slayers there, which looks quite similar to the Dark Elf. That looks like that imagery could be slapped on the front of a cauldron of blood, and you call it a day. So, and there's a mention of Shroudling Kings in the side text. So my money's on those are probably something to do with the Dark Elves, if I were to take a guess.
Absolutely.
And there's also the mention of looks a little bit more like an elf thing at the end of that box text as well. So, yeah. Another news piece that dropped this last week that's tangentially related regarding was miniatures. Shield Wolf had a Kickstarter that they had just launched. They'd raised $40K of their $30K goal, and they canceled their Kickstarter. It had the Shield Maidens and the Orcs, and some of the sculpts were really nice. So, Vince, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this one's interesting, right? So, I definitely wanted to cover this one because I thought this was a big deal. Also, Tom, I'm echoing on you. There you go. That's better. Whatever you did. Yeah, this is interesting because exactly they reached their funding goal. They had like a 30 grand funding goal, right? So they reached 40 grand like 7-10 days in, something like that. They certainly achieved it. It had these really interesting female Shield Maiden sculpts. They're very unique, and we don't have a lot of miniatures like that out there. There was a lot of popular support for these minis, and they just canceled it. And their explanation in the update was basically like, we didn't have the momentum behind it that we really thought we should, and there was a lot of questions over stretch goals and stuff like that. And now they didn't say we're going to pack it up forever. They said we're going to cancel it and come back with a new plan. I get it, but at the same time, I've got to think, man, I don't know how ready people are going to be to back it. I understand nobody really lost anything, right? There was no money deducted. Nobody who backed that thing lost any money because they canceled it during. So it's not like anybody who backed it is out anything. But at the same time, it didn't really engender a lot of goodwill. So it's one of those cases where it's like, I don't know what the right answer is, right? If they really didn't feel like it was going to work out how they wanted and they could do it better, okay, then the company made the right choice, right? But that doesn't mean that the same people who showed up and backed your thing are going to show up next time. right?
Yeah, and not only that, like, we've ran a Kickstarter before, a successful one. And if you've spent any time studying Kickstarters, it's very clear that that there's a lifespan to a Kickstarter, and they hit the kind of the dead lull, after the initial push. And you after that push, you can expect to make generally about 60 to 80% more over the final like 3/4 of your campaign as you did initially. So they were probably looking at a 60 to 70 grand ending point, one would think, as it drew to a close. Yet they killed it. And I agree, Vince. I don't know that I would come back to that next time.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it's just kind of like, it really raises some questions, and it is a shame because I did really like those minis. Pip, have you backed any miniature products or miniature Kickstarters? Do you participate in any miniature based Kickstarters at all?
No, I'm not a big Kickstarter person. I did see their Kickstarter. Actually, this is the first I've heard that they cancelled it. That's disappointing news. I mean, I wasn't a backer, but you were saying before there aren't many female minis out there, and some of those miniatures were a bit on the chainmail bikini side, but some of them did look like good miniatures. So that's
very, very realistic. Some of them were, yeah, absolutely. Something the Dice Bag Lady would have been proud of. I think some of them certainly were.
Yeah, some not so much.
Yeah, sure. They kind of ran the gamut there, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you could say that almost of any miniature company.
Sure. I mean, in the end, this goes straight to like I tell you what, miniatures and Kickstarters, man. It's just it's a thing that I don't really want to get into. When somebody tells me, hey, I've got a new sweet miniature Kickstarter, like I'm not gonna say I've never done any because obviously I backed TGG2 because I was like, all right, this is too awesome not to get into, right? But for the most part, it's got to be just like blow the doors off amazing because otherwise it's just the miniatures are so far away. It's such a volatile market. Making the product is such a difficult thing to do. Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't know. To me, more often than not, thanks. I'll just wait for retail. Like I know it's going to cost me more. Okay, it's fine.
Yep.
I'd rather do that than have your Kickstarter not deliver, or think I'm going to get it a year from now and then have to wait another year after that. Right?
Because that definitely happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all inconvenience and cost me. If I just go forget it, I'm not going to think about it and I wait till retail. Yeah, I pay $10 more, but I didn't think about it or waste any mental energy on it. So in the end, who cares about the $10, right? Like.
Yeah, I mean, I've backed at this point. I've backed both Reaper. I've backed the most recent Kings of War. I backed the Wrath of
Dungeon
Kings.
things. Yep.
Dwarven Forge. I've backed a lot of miniature Kickstarters, and it's interesting. I haven't been burned on any of them yet. I've had to wait significantly longer on a number of them, and the product quality has been mixed. And sometimes it's a win and sometimes it's not. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I will say this, in a related manner. Here's the reality. In much to everyone's surprise, in 2 months, it looks like we will have a pledge manager and they will begin shipping the TGG2 minis.
Absolutely, which I can't wait for.
Which, let me just say, for you guys that have not checked them out, go check them out. You can still get in at the Kickstarter prices. They are still letting people do that. And they have basically fantastic substitutional minis for Dark Elves, Slaanesh, Dark Elves. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Like Dark Elves, Slaanesh Dark Elves, and basically a substitute for Empire / like Sisters of Sigmar kind of proxies. That you could go with like some human Empire stuff, and it just like they're you can get them in resin. They're just over the top.
Yeah, and you can see some of the sculpts now too, because like they actually have the test sculpts, not just the 3D renderings.
Yeah.
Which that's my other thing. That goes straight to what you mentioned earlier, Pip, of like what you can do in the software, and that's what you see a lot on these Kickstarters, right? Is you see like the CAD 3D rendering or whatever, but based on the technology the company's going to use to turn that 3D rendering into a miniature, it's not gonna necessarily end up in near the same ballpark, right? Like those are two very different things often.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you what you said earlier. It's worth not spending the energy and just waiting and paying a little extra to see the miniature in your hand and seeing what they've actually made rather than what they promised to make. Because it's a big gap between what's on the screen and what's cast.
Yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised with how close the TGG2 stuff was, but that's like the reason that it's also notable that that was their second one, right?
Yep.
And so I had seen how the first one had turned out and how close it was to their original sculpts, and that gave me some level of confidence. But even then, I haven't backed anything since then and really probably don't intend to.
Well, other than that, Kings of War, which you're in the process of liquidating.
Yeah, sure. That was whatever. That's fine. If anybody wants an Ogre Kings of War army, if anybody out there is in the market, hit me up. I've got you covered. Super cheap. There you go. All right.
I think that's it for our news.
All right, sounds good. Tom, is that going to segue into the what you is that your what people should read? They should go check out the Toughest Girls in the Galaxy 2 Kickstarter page and go take a look at that.
Sure. That or the Suicide Squad trailer that dropped yesterday.
Oh boy. Oh boy, you love bringing in DC movie trailers. Yes. All right, that's fine. I'm sure everybody has watched it. But yes. Yeah, I'll link the TGG2 one down below. Pip, and what are we always try to direct people to some stuff we've been checking out. I know there was something we talked about before the show. What would you like to direct our viewers to?
If I can put out a shameless plug, the 9th Age Undying Dynasties complete army book. We put this up on Christmas Eve. We should have a slightly corrected one coming out quite soon, but the current one's plenty good. So do go and read it.
Yeah, absolutely. I will certainly link that down below where people can go grab that because it's pretty awesome and it'll give you, I think, and we'll get into this here very shortly, but I think it's a good vision of just what these books could end up looking like. And I've got some other questions for you later about the fluff, but right now, one thing I'll touch on since I don't have any questions in the feature segment queued up is, did the art come a lot internally? Did you all request that out from, like, did you fish out amongst the community and say, hey, who's got the skills, who would like to contribute, or how did you get the art together? Because I was actually very impressed by a lot of the art for that.
That's exactly the way we did it. It's 100% original, 100% internal. So we haven't borrowed anything. Every art piece in the book has been provided by volunteers joining the project.
That's awesome, and that's great. And for just a call out of like, hey, those of you who have got some artistic talent and love some Tomb King like art, send something along. You guys put together some really great layout there as far as the pictures. The people did awesome work, and it looks good in the book.
Anyone who feels they can draw and would like to get in touch, we are always looking for more volunteer artists. We got a lot of art into this book. We would like to get even more into future books.
Well, it's definitely the kind of thing. As somebody who's published several books, there's never, like, you always want to have more artists than you need available because boy oh boy is it, you're always, it's a hunger that can never be fed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so what are we? Excuse me. What I've been watching apparently is a bottle of NyQuil because I've been sick for a couple days, so that's been super fun. For my what should people check out? That kind of thing. What have I been reading? That sort of thing. I just wanted to give a little shout out to Andy and Rem this week. I thought they had a particularly fun and great show this week. If you haven't already gone and watched their show from yesterday, you should go do so. I'll link it down below. Those two guys are awesome. They're doing some great content, and they went really deep on a lot of the dwarves and stuff like that. That's why I really didn't even feel the need like we needed to do it because it would just be duplicate. But definitely go check out their show. They dived really deep on like the War Scrolls, the Magma Dross, and had a great conversation on it. I thought it was totally awesome. So go watch them. They're two awesome guys. There you go. And I'm sure you don't need me to, but I will link their show down below. Okay. So with that, let's do some hobby time real quick. So Pip, you just moved, right? You're over here in the States now. You've come with and hung out with us yet. Do you have any of your hobby stuff with you at all?
No, no. I left the UK with a one suitcase and a piece of hand luggage, so I've left that all back at home. I hope I can get it over sometime in the near future, but right now I don't even have an apartment to take it to yet. So.
Ouch. That's I don't know if I could separate myself. I'd go through withdrawal. Now, do you have anything you're looking at? So 2016. What is something you would like to get done hobby-wise? Like, is there a particular unit, model, something you're like, yeah, I definitely want to get this done and add it to my collection?
Yeah. So I have a couple of armies. I have a Lizardman army, which I've had for a very long time. It's all made of old 5th edition models, and it's mostly complete. I wouldn't really be looking to add anything to that. But I've been working on my. I started an undead project when Games Workshop started their End Times campaign, because I love the look of the Nagash model. So I started trying to do a sort of combined undead army that could switch in for Tomb Kings or vampires, so to get the most out of my collection. And that's I got a lot done in the Christmas break, and there's a lot more still to do. There's a lot of zombies and skeletons to paint. So if I could get that stuff out here, that would be great to finish them off.
There you go. Lining up. All right. Yes, the skeleton and zombie factory line. I love it. Yes, absolutely. That's boy oh boy, is that a never-ending factory line right there? It just keeps going. Just more of them marching along. Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
I'm trying to liven it up with a few unit fillers and things. It's all sort of undead Bretonian themed, so I get to play around with knights getting swarmed over by zombies and that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love it. Fantastic. Well, you said the magic word, Bretonian, so I'm completely in. All right, now I'm fully behind this project. Well, awesome. That sounds great. Tom, what are you working on, buddy? Is it still dwarves?
Yep, still dwarves. And still my December pledge. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting close. So that in order to get to my January pledge, I need to finish my December by the end of January. So that's I know we're closing in. I have a couple of the units, a couple of the siege stuff done. I'm almost on my 3rd siege piece of siege gear, fully detailed and highlighted and everything, and then I'll move on to probably the Coroller unit, which I'll probably never put on the table, and then my air cavalry unit. So we'll see. I think I'll get it done by the end of the month. We'll see.
All right, sounds good. Are you airbrushing a soccer trophy in the background there as well?
No, my son broke his trophy from soccer, and I was repairing it.
Gotcha.
So that's exactly what that is.
You had a really weird unit filler in mind there. It's like for the heavens, because you could spray paint that, and it'd be a pretty good heavens-based unit filler. Maybe put some swirling crap around that. You got the big star right there. You're good to go.
It would look just like the Prime model. No, no. At first I was like, what did I? Yeah. Anyways, no. That's just a thing. Don't worry about that.
Gotcha. All right. For me, I just finished up. These guys will go up later today. I'm very excited about them. I just finished them like quite literally before the show. I finished up my big Minotaurs for my Beastmen. I love these. I had never really got to see these new Minotaurs up close before I did these guys, and they're a lot of fun. I love these big dudes. They got some. These guys are hitting the gym. Let me tell you what. These bros have been lifting. So they were very cool. I got to get some more of those. Definitely in the market for more Minotaurs. I understand now why Doom and Darkness loves his Thug Squad. I get it. Those dudes look like they just want to mess you up. So I dig them a lot. So more stuff for the side project Beastmen Army. As always, we want to know what you're working on. Hopefully, while we're doing this show, you are not just watching, but painting, so we can end the plague of gray models that have threatened this world for so long. Only you can stop gray model syndrome. So, as always, we want to know, what are you working on? Put it down below. Tell us what you're painting. and then share it out to the PMP and to the YouTubers and to everywhere else, because when you post painted models, it inspires other people to do the same, and that's awesome. All right. So with that, I think it's time that we turn to our feature segment, and right on the 30-minute mark today. Boom, we are nailing our marks today. Yes. All right. And our feature segment today, we've got Pip here, and we're going to talk all about Ninth Age and story and the lore and that kind of thing, and what Pip and his team are looking to build and hoping to achieve, and all sorts of things like that. What I will say is we do have the QA on. So if you out there, the viewers, have any questions and you want to ask, I'm more than happy to pass them along as well. I can't promise, if we have a lot of them, I can't promise we'll get to everyone, but certainly post up your questions as well. I'm watching the QA. Throw them in, and we'll put Pip on the spot here, and we'll go for that. But I thought first off, Pip, we'd just start with, like, what's your background, and you know, how did you get involved with the Ninth Age and become the background guru that you are?
Well, thank you. That's a very generous description. I've been in the hobby since I was a kid. Really, I started out with Warhammer Fantasy when it was the 5th edition box set with the old plastic skinks and Bretonians in it. And like everyone else, I was sort of feeling pretty rough when 8th edition came to a close, and a few of my friends in the UK tournament circuit were talking about Ninth Age, so I got involved in the boards. And when they started putting up the call for recruiting for the Army Book committees, I volunteered to try and help out with them with the Lizard Man one. Since you know, I've been to a few tournaments. I can play a tournament game, but I'm not a super competitive tournament player. I mentioned that, you know, I was mainly interested in the opportunity to try and help shape background and lore for the new game. And so Philip Goldman from the rules team said, well, we're actually looking to put together a background team. Would you like to help us do it? And that's how I got involved.
Awesome. So it sounds like you and I started about the same time. I as well started in like 97, 98. I think I might have been a little older than you were at that time, but yeah, I know that Lizardman Bretonian box set well. Of course, the classic pairing. I always love that box set. The classic enemies of Bretonians and Lizardmen. Always the most hilarious of the starter boxes.
Yeah, but it's good value though. I still have all those old Skinks and Saurus.
They did pile it on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of people who are still using a ton of those Bretonian knights as their knights as well. Let's not kid ourselves. A lot of those guys roam in the tables of the world.
Yeah, I think they're still good models. They still stand up. I mean, the Bretonian character sculpts from the Perry twins. Some of them are still some of the best models against which they're produced. The Green Knight.
Yep. Yeah, I do love that green. Absolutely, that Green Knight model is pretty fantastic, no doubt about it. So that's sort of it. Talking about you know, back in time and our experience with that, I thought that maybe a next question would be to kind of like as well to give some background to the audience. I think Tom and I have maybe talked about this before a little bit, but we can certainly give a short answer. But what I really want to know is, so what was your favorite bit of like fluff or story? Could be an army lore, could be anything really from the old world. Like, what is it, you know, throughout your history, if you had to pick one or two that you really loved?
That's a really difficult question to answer. Obviously, a lot of it's through rose-tinted glasses. You know, the 5th edition Lizard Man book was the first one I ever read, and I, as a sort of 12-year-old, I devoured it. There's a lot of stuff in there that I remember very affectionately. If I look back now, I think the thing in the lore that sort of stands out to me is sort of summing up what Warhammer was about. Was the time of the Three Emperors. So, you know, it's just after the Skaven have nearly destroyed the Empire, and, you know, they've just pulled out by the skin of their teeth, and then the Emperor who saved them gets assassinated, and rather than saying, well, you know, we've had a tough time, maybe we should all pull together, 3 separate people say, no, I should be Emperor. And they fight for 800 years about who should be Emperor, despite the fact that there are vampires trying to come and kill them, and they're all more concerned about their own personal gain. And that was to me, that was what set it apart other sort of fantasy games and universes.
Yeah, it always did have that more like I'll say I hate using this word, but it did have that grittier edge to a lot of the world, right? I feel like that gets thrown around a bit too much these days. But that being said, in that kind of case, I think it was appropriate, and it felt dirtier, right? It was a much more lived-in world.
Yeah, it was lived in, and it was sort of more. There were more shades of gray. I think it was necessary for, if you want to have people empathize with the faction they play, then even the bad guys have got to have some sympathetic elements, and even the good guys have got to have some flaws and a sinister side. That's something that I think was really present in sort of that era of books.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, I know there's been many that we've talked about on the show, but do you have anything specifically that comes to your mind quickly from the old world that you particularly loved?
I'm predictable. I loved the High Elf. Like, I loved Ulthuan, and just what it was, and it was exclusionary practices to the extreme. And I was a big fan of just all of the grandeur and beauty of Ulthuan, and I loved when it got sacked as well. So, I really, from a lore standpoint, I just drank up the end times. I loved it. I loved everything that they were doing in the end times, and it's fairly recent. So, it's not a nostalgic thing. This is a very recent thing for me, and so which made it so much more bitter when they basically the story that was told there at the end times feels almost inconsequential now with the new lore.
Sure. All right. Mine is very simple. I've picked it before. I've said it before. I'll say it again. For those who have watched religiously, you might have heard me talk about this, and that is the 5th edition Bretonnia book. You mentioned, you mentioned your young self, encountering that Lizardman book. Pip, for me, it's that 5th edition Bretonnia book, because that is a completely different book. It's a completely different nation they're describing than the 6th edition Bretonnia book, right? If I were to rip the covers off, you wouldn't even know I was talking about the same place.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was so different to what came before as well. I mean, they completely reinvented Bretonnia for that book, and everything that comes after owes what they are to that reinvention.
Yeah, and I love it. It was this weird slice of high fantasy sitting amongst a more sword and sorcery world, right? Of peasants who could rise and become knights and become heroes of chivalry and honor and all this stuff. It did embody the best that mankind could be, while also having failings. There were but they were more like the fairy tale type failings, right? It failed in the way of very classic King Arthur failings or Beowulf or stuff like that, right? As opposed to sort of the gritty War of Roses. Everybody kind of has their pettiness and things like that, right? There could be real heroes, there could be real tragedy, but it was all very extremely melodramatic. And yes,
high Arthurian romance.
Yes, exactly. And that made a great impression upon me, and stuck with me for years and years and years. And to this day, I refuse to acknowledge any of the lore in the 6th edition Bretonnian book as an all legitimate. None of that is real. That is just, as far as I'm concerned, that's just Empire propaganda that they put out to besmirch the name of a much grander nation. So there we go. Real quick, Ice King had a comment, and he said, whoever had the idea for the Hill Goblin Foreman in the 9th Age Orcs and Goblins book should be given a large slice of cake of their choosing. He is awesome, and he just wanted to say thank you to Pip and to the entire 9th Age team. So, hey, totally cool.
That's very nice. I can believe that came from one of the Ogre Kingdom Army Book Committee, so that was... one of the examples of 9th Age doing what it does best, where we do take ideas from the community and integrate them.
Very cool. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. All right, so let's go to next question. Here we go. All right, Pip. Now we're going to turn. It's time. The grilling really begins now. Are you prepared?
I am prepared.
Excellent. That is what I like to hear. Okay, so. What would you describe as the general goals of the background team for the 9th Age, and what do you Pip specifically hope you bring to the project?
Well, so the reason we have a background team, I would say, is you know, a lot of people when we sort of started out said, "Why? Well, we weren't expecting this. We thought it was just a tournament rule set." And the reason we have a background team is because we, and not just a background team, the whole project, you know, we're putting a lot of time into this. We see this as a game that we want to see run and run. And if you want new players to come into the game, then there has to be more than just the rules. You know, we don't have a super generic rule set. We have 16 different armies that have some very unique units. And just representing those units as numbers and points values on a page is not going to engage people or even explain what the game's about. So we felt we need our own original background that will just give people an easy introduction to what the game's representing. And then we thought, well, we could, you know, do the bare minimum and provide that, or we could do something we can actually use, and hopefully what will be coming far, far down the line when the game is in a much more stable state, we will be expanding the background, using it to add new factions, maybe have global campaigns. All this kind of stuff is possible if you have a properly developed world to work from. So that's our ultimate aim. It's to make the game sustainable and attractive for new players by giving it its own unique original background. And as for what I personally bring, I got in first, which was great. And I think we've got quite a large team now, still growing, and got lots of different ideas. Some people, we've got archaeologists, historians, linguists, all putting in their own unique contributions. And mainly what I do is I tell them which of their brilliant ideas can't make it, which is sometimes a very painful job. But you know, you have to have a sort of, rather than having a bucket of disconnected good ideas, you do need to have a central thread through a lot of things. And so I'm trying to coordinate the design to make something that all hangs together on certain themes.
Yeah, that, like, to speak to your first point, I couldn't agree with that more strongly. Because when I think of my own personal experience, and really the experience of most people that I know, they didn't flip open one of these Warhammer books when they were 12 or 15 or 17 or 20 or however old they were, right? And look at like a unit section and look at a series of numbers and points values and go, I need to play this game, right? That isn't what they did. They looked at like the pictures and the art. They saw something cool that looked like a neat image. They read some of the story and thought, and then that led them to dig deeper to read the story. And they were like, whoa, that sounds pretty awesome, right? And then after that had hooked them, then they started reading the rules. So I totally agree. Like, you've got to have that strong narrative to bring it in. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's exactly our aim.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, it's interesting. I think how it speaks to how we experience products out there in the world, right? And some part of it is that prima facie, and that's why I mentioned the art earlier and was happy to see that the art of that Undying Dynasties book was so good, because that's the first thing. Like, as somebody who sold books at a convention, you know, if your art isn't up to snuff, first thing people do when they pick up your book is they look at it, they flip through. They're not looking at rules, they're just looking for pictures, right? And whether or not they keep flipping through it is going to be a question of whether or not you've got like even one image that grabs their attention and makes them then dig deeper, right? So
yeah.
So yeah, and
we'll have much more art to show in the near future. In fact, we've released just yesterday a sneak peek of some of the Sylvan Elves art that's going to be going into the Sylvan Elves book, which is next on our slate.
Oh, very cool, excellent. I did not realize that. I didn't see that, or I would have mentioned that in the news. I'm sorry. That's totally
sorry, I
cool.
should have thought of that actually.
No issue at all. Well, there you go. So check that out too. I am going to go check that out right after the show because I want to see. I've always loved, like, I love Wood Elf, the Sylvan Elf look. That's always been like, that's been the one brand of elf look, much to Tom's chagrin, I'm sure, that I could actually stomach and stand. Like, the Dark Elves are too many dumb, pointy, sharp things everywhere. Just like, how are they not constantly covered in Band-Aids? And the High Elves just looked like pointy-headed, just stuck up. Ugh. I want to go into it. Too much anger over High Elves. But the Wood Elves, now that's a down-to-earth elf I can get behind. I've always loved like the forest theme, the seasonal themes, that kind of stuff. So that's cool. Very nice. All right. So we mentioned the Undying Dynasties, and I want to kind of dig down on that for a minute because that was the first, you know, sort of full draft book that came out. And like I said, I liked very much. I mentioned you before the show. I'll put the link down there. I highly recommend everybody go check out the Undying Dynasties book. Everybody who watches probably knows I have a deep-seated love for Tomb Kings. I was there, bought the Tomb Kings book week 1 when it came out back in 2004 or whatever, and proceeded to lose with that army for years afterward because it was garbage. Didn't care, still loved how they looked. And this is a nice book. I love the narrative. I love the framing device you've got there of like the archaeologist. I've talked to you about that. But what was your goals with the Undying Dynasty book? Are you happy with it? What do you hope to see that's in it carry over to other books, that kind of thing? Just talking about it in general and how you feel about it now, some time after it's been out for a little while.
Yeah. So you mentioned the framing device of the first-person narrative, and that's actually something that we are looking to carry over to every other book. Every book we want to be presented through a subjective point of view from inside the game universe, and that relates back to what you were talking about before with the 6th edition Bretonian book is Empire Propaganda. We know that we have a lot of people for whom their army is a particular thing, a particular aesthetic, a particular ideology, whatever. And we know that we can't please everybody, so we want things to be subjective. So that if there's a part that you don't like, if there's just a detail that bugs you, maybe they're wrong. Maybe there's something they don't know. Maybe they haven't got a complete picture. So we're very much trying to make sure that everything is presented from a point of view of first-hand experience rather than an omniscient narrator, and that there are plenty of blank space on the map. Beatrix, the character who narrated the Undying Dynasties book, she might be coming back for some future books. We have other characters we're hoping to use as narrators for other books. This is all part of our approach.
That's awesome. There's 2 things I love there that you said that I want to key in on. One, the unreliable narrator. Love the unreliable narrator, right? I've always loved the in-world person talking more than just the omniscient, narrator. And I agree with you for everything you just said. Because, again, it makes it more real. There's something more real about, like, having, the story from the point of view of the peasant, or from the point of view of, like, the empire merchant, or whatever, the soldier who's in line, right? All these sorts of things are more interesting than looking at it like this, right? Where you're just sort of top down and you're just watching pieces move around. It puts you behind the eyes, right? It's the same reason that first-person games are often engaging, right?
Yeah.
The second thing I love there that you mentioned, I want to key in on, is the idea that she could come back. So this question wasn't on my list, but you just sort of sparked it in my mind. And so do you have a concept that you want to have kind of your own, I'll put the finger quotes around it because it's not really what I mean. I don't necessarily mean you need rules, but your own special characters, that sort of are like the characters people begin to identify with in the world and are sort of known quantities throughout the narrative. And not necessarily that they ever have rules, just that they are known people in the world.
Yeah, no, that's an aim of ours, that we want to make our viewpoint characters recur. So obviously there are some armies that have common themes, and a single character who has a relation to those themes could explore that. In the long term, if we can convince the rules guys, we might even try and get the rules made for them. We have a whole sort of big secret list of things we're going to bug the rules guys about after they're done balancing the core game and making it a really watertight product. We don't know how much they'll listen to us, but we're going to try.
I like it. Very good. Yeah, this is probably where I'm weird. I would bet most of our audience and most everybody out there in the world would disagree with me. But when you make a couple that are really good, I would hope you never actually put rules behind them. This is something that like Ed Greenwood always used to say, who's the guy who wrote Forgotten Realms, is that he was always very opposed to putting rules behind like a lot of his very famous narrative characters, because once you put rules behind them, they were real and they had limit, like, what I mean, what they could do was now a complete known quantity, right? Like they can be killed and not, and like exactly, oh, they're this strong, they're this hard to hit, they're this tough, blah 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 blah, right? They have a set expected value. When they don't have that, when there's like, when I'm just reading like Felix and Gotrek or something like that, those guys just seem totally badass, right? Regardless of, I don't know that how tough they are as humans or whatever. It doesn't matter. I just know that like narratively they seem really compelling. You know, I'm
Yeah, I
not.
know what you mean. There's definitely that aspect to consider. From my point of view, that's all very speculative, the idea of rules for our viewpoint characters. But if it were to happen, mostly we wouldn't be talking about sort of Felix and Gotrek or Elminster. We're talking more like Rincewind. Maybe these guys are sort of a low level hero character, and they might have a funny rule or two about how they always get into scrapes.
I like it. All right, that I support that absolutely. As long as you've got some, you sort of have the two cadres, right? The two cohorts. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with that. Absolutely. All right. Okay, so now it's time for my challenging question. I think this is one I certainly don't want to put you on any spot, but I think this is a question that came up a lot and that we've talked about on the show, and so I thought I'd like to have you give us an answer.
So you're
And that's
breaking up.
oh, sorry. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me
Can you
okay?
hear me?
I can, yeah. I can hear you okay. Can you hear me all right there, Pip?
I can now. That's right. There was a long Dalek section.
All right, no problem. Okay, so quick question. Here we go. Maybe a little tough, but I think that you have a good answer for it based on what you said already. And that is, so do you feel there's a tension between the background being close enough to the old world to be familiar, but yet different enough to be something that stands on its own? In other words, a lot of people who come to the game are going to be coming with expectations from older editions of Warhammer or something like that. And so how do you navigate that Scylla and Charybdis or whatever, Charybdis? How are you scaling those waters?
That's definitely one of our biggest challenges. We have to create something that's original, that's its own creation. But at the same time, our goal is to create something that retains the interest of players who've come from Warhammer, and that lets you use your full collection and not as some kind of awkward proxy. So we do have to sort of square the circle in that regard. And the way we're doing it, which some clues have already been released, is it's not a secret that the Warhammer world wasn't terribly original. It's very strongly based on the real world, and that was one of its strengths. That you look at Tombkind and you immediately recognize, oh, they're like Egyptians, or you look at the Empire and you say that's like the Holy Roman Empire. So our approach is we are not trying to reverse engineer Games Workshop's world. We are going back for each army to the real world inspirations and the mythological inspirations that made them appealing, and we are just developing those in a different direction. So armies should remain recognizable. The shape of the world should remain recognizable because it's based on our own world. But we are starting from the bottom again.
And that makes a lot of sense. You're exactly right, because the reason that fluff, that the lore, I think, of the Warhammer fantasy world was grokkable, I think you're exactly right, was because you saw something of a history or a myth or a legend that you particularly loved in it, right? Like my love of Arthurian sort of romanticism, I see that in Bretonnia, right? It's the same sort of thing or whatever. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So, like, when you're approaching this for, say, the Undying Dynasties, right? So here we've clearly got our source material. We've got this Egyptian period, right? This high, mighty empire, chariot-driven, right? A pharaoh at the top, magically based, whatever, all these kinds of things. How did you approach that and say, okay, we look back, we look at that culture. How did you then look at that and peer through that lens to build a new story? Like, maybe walk me through kind of, just at a high level, what were your thought processes?
Well, so one of the reasons we chose Undying Dynasties to do first is because they were one of the easy ones. They don't have anything in them that any kind of core concept that really belongs to Games Workshop. They are undead Egyptians. So we said, right, we have these rules that we need to explain, and most of the background text in the army book is describing the units that the rules describe. We have these models, including these models that aren't in the army book that people may want to use in future, like Nagash. So we know we needed a big baddie. And we have these themes. We have that they are undead, that they're Egyptian, and we conducted some polling on the forums. We said, what 3 words best sum up your army? What one thing do you like the least about your army? Which characters did you feel summed up the character of the army the best? We weren't trying to do our writing by democratic poll, but we're trying to get a sense of what the general feeling was. So then we, having sort of assembled all that information, we parceled out different parts, different writers on the team. So, for example, for this book, because we were putting the team together and because I wanted to show the rest of the team an example of how I wanted the books to be laid out, I did most of the writing for Beatrix, for her first-person sections. And then all the stuff she quotes from other people, that's mostly other members of the team contributing their own components. Can you hear me? Because you've frozen on my screen.
Yep, I can hear you. Absolutely. Sorry, I was standing very still. But yes, I'm still here.
Okay. Sorry, I think my connection here is not great. But yeah, so we put it all together. We sort of review and discuss among ourselves, and then one stage we didn't get right this time was the proofreading. So we rushed it out to try and make it a Christmas Eve present. So we've learned from that experience. We are currently in the process of doing a proper proofreader and getting it corrected. The next book we will have this process mature. So it's a learning process for us as well.
No, very cool. Yeah, I like that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was just say, book and product production is always a tough thing, and proofreading, you can read something 100 times, and I can assure you, you will still have editing errors and other things slip through like that.
Yeah.
It is a discipline of just getting as many eyes on it as possible, and it's a lot of work. So I was very impressed with the product that you guys ended up putting out with the Undying Empires.
Yeah, it seems to have had a positive reception, and that's all we could have hoped for. That this sort of first taste of what we're going to try and produce has been received quite positively.
So, was there any particular piece of say the TK, and if not that, maybe something else that you've already had eyes on? Is there any particular piece that's been particularly challenging to fit into the lore because it's just so weird or so out there? You know what I mean? Like you've got a unit or some element that you're trying to, it has to go in there because there are rules about it, and so it needs to fit in the story, but you're like, oh, I don't know where to fit this in. Have you run up against anything that's been particularly challenging like that?
Mostly the kind of challenges we run up against there are trying to make the more unique factions our own. Factions like the Skaven, they are much more original to Games Workshop than, say, the Bretonnians or the Doom Kings. So to make our Vermin Swarm, we have to find another direction to take them in, where players will still like it, where it's still got the mad science and stuff that people enjoy, but where we are doing our own thing. And that's been the subject of a lot of sort of brainstorming and discussion. I can't reveal too many details here, unfortunately.
Oh, no, I understand, of course.
Yeah.
But that doesn't surprise me. In thinking about it, when you were describing it, I thought, I bet the Skaven are going to be fairly challenging because they are full of so many little, unique, weird picadillos and don't have a lot. They don't have the same amount of real-world comparison, right?
Yeah. So if you want one example of a thing we still haven't decided what to do with yet, it's warpstone. So many Skaven miniatures have chunks of warpstone on them. So much of what they do is explained by, I say explained, I mean, a wizard did it with warpstone.
Yes, explained.
Yeah. So we feel like we need to find something that has a nod to all this weird rock on the models. But we are still figuring out exactly what to do there.
Rather than a radiation, let me throw out an idea. Rather than doing radiation rock, which is what it is, could could you do something like suggesting it's like the Philosopher's Stone style? You know, like, because if alchemy is really kind of the root of what's going on, maybe you could lean into the kind of the historical origins of alchemy itself.
That's a cool idea. And that's the kind of thing where we have these discussions, and so I guarantee you, if I take this back to the background team, which I might, if you don't mind.
No, please go ahead.
You know, we'll say, well, you know, but Skaven don't have access to the law of alchemy. So how do we square these rules?
Yep.
And we know that we can't. We know that it's not our place to go to the rules team and say, can they have this because we want this background at this point. There's so much work on the army book committees and the rules team and the balancing boards plate. We don't want to interfere now. We are planning to interfere later once things are settled down. But for now, we're just trying to make ourselves useful and not be as difficult.
Sure. Well, the reason they don't have the lore of alchemy, that's exactly why they use the stones. If they had the lore, that's why nobody else uses the stone. The kingdoms, they've got, you know, like the College of Magic, they've got the lore of alchemy. They don't need a stone to replicate it, right? This is the way that the Skaven cheat through the same magics. There you go.
That's an excellent idea. Yeah, I'll definitely bring that back for discussion.
Solving problems. That's what we're doing here. All right. So, okay. So for kind of my last big question for you, I thought this one would be fun. And I won't hold you to this, nor will any of our viewers. But if you're made complete king for a day, okay, of Ninth Age, and so you get to add any new piece of lore you want into the world, which can have rules or not. It's up to you, whatever, it doesn't matter. And it will be balanced perfectly, and it will never be a problem, and all cascading changes will be absolutely wonderful, and no one will complain, okay? You just get to wave a magic wand and be like, this thing that I love, this story element is now in the world, okay? So, could be a new army, could be a new race, could be a new anything, I don't care. Doesn't matter. Any element. What would you love to see put into the world of the Ninth Age that maybe isn't there now, or that, you know, what in your pie in the sky future?
Fishman.
All right. Wow, you're gonna make a lot of people happy.
That's a joke.
All right, good, because I was scared, but believe me,
Oh,
you say Fishman.
No, we're gonna lead into this. Okay, so
Oh
Fishman.
Jesus! Don't make him do it.
Here you go. Atlantis. Okay, it's baked in. You're talking about the mythology. You're talking about culture stuff. And so it is a lost continent. Maybe it was a continent built on this Philosopher's Stone, and they were transmuted through the activation of that sunk the land. Boom, done.
Oh my God!
Nice.
So ridiculous.
I think if there's already a lot of things that we are adding. So really, my wish list is kind of depleted. Would you mind if I mention one thing we are doing?
Absolutely not. You can mention whatever you want, sir.
Okay, so since I am king of the Ninth Age, I have added something which is a very broad and general point, which is we are trying to massively expand the scope of the human nations in the world. So, you know, with Games Workshop's Warhammer, you have the Old World, and you have the Empire and Britannia, and then there's Estalia and Talia, and the Border Princes, and then there's some general acknowledgement that there are human nations beyond this.
What we're trying to do is today and those kind of things.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is you know, we're still telling the story from the perspective of our Europeans, but we're trying to make the human population beyond Europe more fleshed out. We're trying to show that the world exists beyond Europe as people other than scary monsters. So we've been developing names for cities and cultures and ideas for what those cultures are like for all these non-European human cultures that are going to be mixing and interacting with the neighboring non-human cultures. So hopefully one of the materials will be showing in the mid to near future is our map, and our map will have some of these locations on it you can see.
That is awesome. No, that's great. You're going to make some people very happy. There was actually a question that came up when I mentioned you being on the show. Somebody had actually asked of whether or not they thought, like, one of the questions that they wanted to ask was whether or not there would ever be any mention of like a Nippon-like place, right? Like that kind of thing, because they always loved that idea. Um, and so it sounds like, not that exact name, but the concept that that was getting at, it sounds like you're looking to explore, right, of these other and distinct human cultures around the world, not just the classic Eurocentric view of what was motivating the story of Warhammer, right?
Yeah, I mean, Games Workshop had their focus on those nations because they sold those armies. That's perfectly fair, but we feel like we're not constrained by that business model. We can do something different and better.
It's a great point. There's a lot of liberation that you have because the models are out there, the things are there, so I mean, like, you're certainly not as constrained to, like, I can only print these rules because I have to sell this associated unit or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all free labor, so I mean, it's all free.
Right. Right. No, that's awesome. That's great. I think a lot of people are going to be very excited about that and very excited to see a map. I know for one, will look forward to that. That sounds super cool.
Yeah, I can't promise a date for that map, but it's in the works.
Sometime soon. I'll hold you to soon, and we can define that in either human or geologic times if it takes a little longer. You can move it out, like, that's fine. In the next 10,000 years is soon in geological time, so you're fine. There you go. You can probably meet that deadline, I hope.
I'd hope so.
All right, very good. Well, that was all the questions I had that I wanted to move through. Those were all fantastic answers. Pip, I guess I'll just turn it over to you to say, any kind of closing thoughts you have on Ninth Age and the background of it and that kind of thing.
There's so much I'd love to say, but we do have a policy of we're trying not to show our work in isolation. When things are taken out of context, they can be seen as being done on a whim or an arbitrary fashion. We really think like the proof's in the pudding. Publish something complete, like a piece of artwork or like the Undying Dynasties book, and let people judge it on its own merits. So I won't go into the details of our work. I think it's going to be a long haul getting it all out. We are working with volunteer labour, and I know I don't have the most time at the moment. And I'm continually impressed by everyone who contributes their time to help the project along. I think it is amazing that the community's come together in this way to work on this project. I remember, a lot of during 8th and previous editions, I remember a lot of people saying, "Oh, why don't we just house rule this?" And tournament comp was about the nearest thing the community got to, fixing the problems with the rules, which were always acknowledged. And it's great to see that given one hell of a kick to do so, we can actually do it.
I agree. It's amazing. Like, I know how hard it is to wrangle a small team of people. I can't imagine how much difficulty it is to wrangle all of these vast contributors. I looked at like the workflow matrix. If you ever want your brain to slightly bleed a little, go look at like the workflow matrix that's on the Ninth Age of like who's responsible for what and what team handles what and where everything goes. And it's impressive.
If I could say one thing about the Ninth Age, actually, I'd say our site admin, Tiny, is his username. Goes by the name Philip in real life, I believe. He is a force of nature. He is not on the rules team. He does not get involved with the minutiae of what gets nerfed or what gets buffed or all this. He just single-handedly makes the project work, and he's recruited a few of us onto the executive board to help him out. And I always feel guilty that I can't do a fraction of what he does in terms of just sheer perseverance.
Well, it's obvious there's a lot of passion behind all this. That's the only thing that gets this done, right? As you mentioned, it's all volunteer work, and I think that's the proof in the pudding of what makes it an interesting and valid and awesome project, is that it is the culmination of so much passion from so many people, right? all participating at different levels, and that's okay. You know, people have different amounts of time and stuff like that, but it's about making that great product together.
Yeah. Yeah, and people do have strong feelings about a lot of things, and sometimes they express those in very strong ways. But, you know, we've got thick skin. We muddle along.
Yes, I'm sure for many members of the executive board and the rules committees and the Army book committees, thick skin is probably should be written on the requirements for participation. Yeah, because it's often, I'm guessing, a thankless job. But I think most people should certainly be thankful for the hundreds, if not thousands, of hours I am positive many people are putting into individually are putting into this.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is a full-time job you don't get paid for. So, I mean, kudos to you. Let's not underestimate that. It's easy to be a consumer and sit there and be like, "Meh, I don't like this," and judge people. But, you know, you're really legitimately doing the work. That's what I'm saying. So, you have my all you and all members of the team have a very deep respect for me, who's been doing game design for a long time and knows how many hundreds of hours goes into this. For all the great work you've done. Tom and I have both done it for a while, and I just want to say that I as well want to agree with Ice King and say thank you for you and the rest of the team for all your work, and especially you, because I love putting this much love and effort into the lore and into the background, because, again, for me, that's always what's made the game very real.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I think I have the easy job. I think people don't come to us after they've lost the game saying, "No, my army needs to be stronger." So
they don't complain that the story wasn't strong enough to make them win. Is that what it was? You're saying that doesn't happen?
That doesn't happen, thankfully.
Well, there you go. You picked the right team, then. That's what I'm hearing here. You have chosen the right profession on this particular project. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Pip, I want to thank you again very much, and thank all of you out there who watched and who are viewing this in the future. As I said, we're very excited about the Ninth Age. We'll certainly keep tabs on this, continue to update you. Pip, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. We'd love to have you, and by the way, spread the word amongst the rest of the team if anybody else wants to come on the show. We'd love to have them, any of the Army Book Committee members and stuff like that. As these books come out, we'd love to continue to popularize it, to talk to the people who design it, who write the fluff, who write the rules, any of that, and make sure that the word gets out about the Ninth Age project. We're always excited to do that.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that that's brought up.
Fantastic. All right, very good. Well, thank you, sir. Like I said, I've said it. I said it to many of our guests, and I really mean it to you as well. You're welcome back anytime. Best of luck now that you're here in America for a while. We're happy to have you here in the States, and so best of luck with your career and all of that, and of course with the project. And to all of you out there, thank you very much for watching. And as always, we'll see you next Wednesday.